Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. My name is Brandon Kumar. I am the co-founder of Layer3. Before starting Layer3, I spent 6 years as an investor at a firm called Accolade Partners. Um, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about what Layer3 is, but for the audience benefit, we are a two-sided marketplace. So we help large chains in crypto acquire users, and we provide the infrastructure for them to distribute their token to the right user at the right time. And then on the consumer side, we very much act as a Google for crypto. So we allow them to find protocols that are relevant to their needs and interests in a seamless and intuitive way. Yeah, it's an interesting path. So as I mentioned, I studied economics in undergrad. And when I had graduated, I joined Accolade, which at the time was managing around 1 billion. Today, I think they manage around 4 or 5 billion. And I joined as a generalist. So Accolade, for those that perhaps are less familiar, is what's known as a fund of funds. So they take money from large endowments and foundations and family offices, and they invest that into venture capital funds, growth equity funds, and private equity funds. And we were one of the larger limited partners in Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen in 2017 and 2018 came to market with their first crypto vehicle. And we were one of the first limited partners that they had called. Um, and that was a very special position to be in because we quickly realized that the fund that Andreessen was raising did not belong in our core commingled fund of funds. However, it had a compelling risk return profile. And so what we did was go to a lot of LPs and say, are you interested in investing in this vehicle? And there was a lot of demand, which kind of earmarked the firm's entrance into the space. And so what we did was raise a larger fund of funds to invest in some of the most dominant crypto venture funds. Very similar to the 80s and 90s, if you are a large LP, so you're a large endowment or a large foundation, you want exposure to an asset class like crypto, but you don't have the resources or the time to get to know every individual venture manager because you're probably only going to put maybe 50 basis points or 1% of your total assets under management into the asset class. So instead, what you can do is back a fund like Accolade. And the reason this is related to Layer3 is my job was to meet and find a lot of those leading venture firms. And so I was traveling around the country and around the world, meeting with folks like Jesse Walden, the founder of Variant, Olaf, the founder of Polychain, the team at Multicoin, the team at Framework. These are some of the most well-known venture firms in the industry. And in doing so, I had to meet with a lot of the founders that they had backed. And so I was using these products, and it quickly kind of occurred to me that there was no business that acted as the connective tissue between protocols and consumers. So if you think about the internet in kind of the early 2000s, prior to the advent of Google or search, you had to know exactly what website you wanted to go to, and you had to know that URL. So let's say I wanted to get the weather, I had to know that I wanted to go to, HTTP www.weather.com, right? And then you had search, and that kind of abstracted that complexity, and you could say, I'm looking for the weather. What websites can give me the weather? And that same dynamic exists in crypto today. So what we tried to build is a product that acts as that connective tissue. And I'll talk a little bit about Layer3's business, but what had happened for me was I knew I wanted to go into the operating side. I needed a business that I was really excited about and a co-founder that I was really excited about. And in 2021, all of those pieces kind of came together. I got the firm's blessing. All of the partners at Accolade did ultimately invest in my business. And many of the underlying managers that we had backed are also some of our largest investors. Yeah, so the best way to think about Layer3's business instead of it as education is as an aggregator. So there's a popular tech writer, his name is Ben Thompson, and he writes a blog post called Stratechery that I would highly recommend people read. It has some of the highest signal writing in the industry. Um, However, aggregation theory is a framework that provides a way to understand some of the largest businesses of the internet. So Google, Amazon, Meta, et cetera. So what does an aggregator have? It aggregates the supply side of a given network. So Amazon is aggregating e-commerce, Netflix is aggregating content, Google is indexing information. It has a distribution channel that allows the supply side to reach the demand side, i.e. consumers, and then it owns that consumer relationship. And so what we are building is an aggregator for crypto. So we are aggregating the supply side being blockchains. So if you're familiar with Base or Optimism or Arbitrum, as well as the apps, so projects like Uniswap and Aave and Compound. And then we have a distribution channel. The distribution channel is the platform that we've built as well as the protocol that allows them to distribute their token. And then we have a direct relationship with the end consumer. Now, education, as you know, is a very good wedge because we created a product that appeals to someone who's trying to understand how to make their first swap, how to provide liquidity, How do I perhaps find games that are interesting or NFTs that are interesting? And then we're able to serve them more over time. And I think the best analogy for this would be when Amazon first started, they primarily sold books. Then over time, they began to sell all e-commerce products. And then because they had data, they were able to now build their own products as well, their private label products. And we very much view our business in the same way, which is first we were doing primarily education. Then we started to show more complex things to do. And then we started to build our own products. And so today, Layer3 is very much a multi-product firm. So you have discovery, which is what we're most well known for. You have our wallet product, so a way to custody funds and transact on chain. You have our trade product, a way to trade any asset across any chain. And then you have our games product, a way to predict, our version of a prediction market, Guild, which is a team-based game, and then Races, which is a time-based game. So hopefully that gives us sort of a lens as to how we think about our business over time. Before I pause, I was recently asked what Layer3's end game is, and our end game is to be the most dominant and most used consumer platform in the industry. And the best way to do that is to kind of progressively add new products to our product suite. Yeah, great questions. And so a little bit to the answer I had just given about aggregation, we have multiple revenue streams. So the best way to understand our business and our revenue profile is that you have the B2B component, so how much money we're making from other businesses in the industry. And then you have the B2C component, so how much money we're making from the consumers in the market. So on the B2B side, we generate revenue by taking 20% of tokens that go through our platform. So let's say a large chain gives us a few $1,000,000 to distribute their token through our infrastructure. We take 20% of that token, and that comes to our balance sheet. On the consumer side, there are two primary revenue streams. The first is a credential mint. So we have a product called a Cube. It stands for Credential to Unify Blockchain Events. It takes the metadata from all the transactions that a user takes when they're doing something on Layer3, and it consolidates that into an NFT known as an ERC-721. And we use that to retarget the user so that we know, like, for instance, let's say you as a consumer are very active in DeFi. I can target you when I'm working with new DeFi protocols because of this Cube. And that costs a few cents to mint. And then the second consumer revenue that we have is trading revenue. So when you are trading assets, we take a small fee. Our business today does about $20 million in revenue annually, and we are profitable because we have a 16-person team. We've been profitable now for about 18 months. Yeah, I mean, I would say we are often comped to businesses that are called Quest platforms, though I think we very much try not to think about ourselves as a Quest platform. The name you mentioned, as well as some of the other platforms in the industry, tend to focus very much on social actions. So what they do is they have these kind of activations where consumers come and it says, oh, go follow this brand on Twitter, go join them in Discord. So the first differentiation is that we primarily focus on getting users to do things on chain. The second primary differentiator is that we are distributing value. So when you take on-chain actions through Layer3, you're actively earning tokens. The others, it's typically points or NFTs. It's never really value. The third is their products are permissionless. And this is a slightly nuanced point, but very important, where any project can show up and create an activation on those platforms. And while that may seem good in nature, it actually creates a lot of dilution for the end user. And so what we try to do is have more of a curated approach where as a consumer, when you come to our platform, you're only consuming products that we have vetted, that we ourselves have used, that are audited in nature. It's a highly curated experience. And the reason that is so powerful is because if I'm a high quality consumer, I only want to see high quality products. And so we've been able to stand out in that nature. And then the fourth, and I think that's obviously important for anyone who is an investor, is just financial performance. I believe we are generating an order of magnitude more in revenue, and we are far more profitable. So there's just that as well. As for any founder in the industry, I do think you have to navigate market cycles. And so your business and your team can be executing very well, but if macro is rough, you have to navigate that. And I think that takes some adjustment because as a kind of a student of markets and a student of business, if you're like a traditional tech company in the early years, macro has less influence on you. Like let's say outside of crypto, if I'm building enterprise software, macro typically has less influence. Yes, maybe it might be softer demand. in a worse economy, but I don't have an asset that I need to worry about on a day-to-day basis. It's not until you become a public company that you really worry about macro in kind of a non-crypto sense. However, because of tokenizing assets, if you are a tokenized protocol, meaning you have an asset that is trading on a regular basis, you need to navigate market cycles as well as building an early stage business. And I think there are many challenges that go into it. Fortunately, now we've seen like a number of kind of market environments. And so we've built a pretty robust mentality around it internally, as well as just a good capability for dealing with quieter environments. But that is definitely a huge challenge. I think the most important thing is to understand what metrics you have control over and can move. So we as a team are extremely metrics driven. Every morning, all of our KPIs are sent into a public Slack channel that the entire team can see. And it is very important as a founder to identify what metrics that your actions have direct influence over, or at least are largely able to influence. A few days ago, Trump imposed a series of tariffs that sent markets into a bit of a turmoil. There are certain things in our business that we now know are not in our control. And so I and the rest of our team have built a capability around not worrying about those in these moments. However, what we are still doing is very much paying attention to the metrics that matter. And there's a phrase that I think is very important, which is teams perform based on what you inspect, not what you expect. And so we try to very much create that culture where, look, we're not worried about macro, we're worried about the KPIs that we feel we have control over. And that I think has led to us being a little bit more resilient in macro environments that are perhaps less favorable. Well, the easiest way to think about how we think about our product expansion is what touches the consumer that we don't touch, right? So maybe 6 months ago, the core product that stood between us and the consumer was the wallet. So in order to use our platform or any other platform in the industry, you had to have an EOA wallet that you would use to do so. And so we have built our own wallet. Our objective, as I think I mentioned earlier in the conversation, is to bring products to market that really own more of that consumer experience. Because if you own that consumer experience, you can monetize it in different ways. You can monetize it through fees because you're controlling the flow. You can monetize it by helping other businesses acquire users. You can bring new products to market that are also fee generating. And there are many really broken experiences in crypto today, be it moving stables from specific chains, sending assets around, finding compelling ways to get yield, discovering new protocols, playing games. The user experience is still quite broken. And our team and the data that we've built, we believe is unique in that it helps us maintain and grow a competitive advantage with the consumer. So put simply, we want to bring more products to market that serve the consumer's needs in the industry. I think about I think about challenges in a few ways. You have market challenges, you have product challenges, and you have team challenges. So market challenges are there's two things. There are factors outside of our control, which we discussed earlier. So this would be macro. Let's say that the tariffs are imposed. Macro is really bad. We go into a recession. That is one challenge you need to navigate. Totally surmountable. We've got a very strong balance sheet and we can endure, but that is a challenge. The second is within market is kind of competitive, right? So the larger you get as a business, the more revenue you do, but also the more competition you begin to face because others see that you have built a good business and they think that they can, replicate your success. And so we've already started to see that, and navigating kind of the competitive dynamic, I think is a market challenge. The product challenge, I would say is probably our largest advantage, which is the ability to create a product team that brings world-class products to market. I think that there are a lot of products in crypto, but they're not world-class, and we try to maintain a very high bar. So if you just build really great products and you have very strong product market fit, it's amazing how many other problems in your business suddenly go away. If people just demand what you're building, you're able to cut through a lot of issues. But maintaining that over time, right? So we've now, I would say, had periods of success, of sustained success for roughly 18 months. So making sure that we as a product team don't rest on our laurels and continue to bring great products to market. And then the final is team. This industry can be quite distracting. You have prices occasionally, going hyperbolic. People feel on paper that they're making a tremendous amount of money. And so bringing a team and a group of people together that are cohesive and stay together for a very long time is very important. I very much believe that a lot of founders say, I want to run a 30-person company or a 100-person company. I, in theory, never want to run that large of a business. I instead want to keep a small group of people who are very capable and can go faster and faster and faster and faster. And with AI, that's possible, but you have to retain them, right? And retaining talent is challenging in crypto just because there are so many opportunities for people to pursue. So I would say those are the three big ones. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about how the business found its footing. So we started the business in 2021. And with any network effects business, you have what's known as a cold start problem, where it's hard to get one side of the marketplace without the other. Facebook, for instance, it's not very valuable if there's only one person. It's a little bit more valuable if there are 10, but it's far more valuable when you have 3 billion people, right? And so we had that same issue, which was we knew that we wanted to help protocols acquire users, and we wanted to help users find protocols. But we needed to get the users and we needed to get the protocols. So what we did was bring a product to market built entirely using no-code tools. So this is a bit of, I think, behind the scenes on how our business came to be. My co-founder just said, you know what, I'm going to build the product as quickly as possible. And I said, I'm going to go sell the product as quickly as possible. So I would talk to pretty much anyone that would talk to us. And this is back in 2021. I got a lot of introductions from our investors. And we were able to convince a few teams that, hey, we think we can build a compelling business for you in acquiring users. And then on the consumer side, as we started to bring these products to market, consumers like, oh, this is interesting. It's a very seamless experience. I want to give it a shot. And that got us basically through our first 2 quarters as a business because it was just hustling and trying to convince teams. And then we started to build out our engineering capability and we started to actually build the layer 3 protocol. And it became a more complex under the hood, but we still tried to keep that simplicity for the end consumer. And that brought us through maybe the first year. And at that point, we had now had a large enough and more powerful enough flywheel and network effect that we were able to sell into larger and larger customers. So we were able to sell to Base or to Optimism or some of these really large chains because we had enough consumers. And it occurred to us that if you are helping other businesses acquire users and users are choosing what products to use through your business, you have a tremendous amount of data as to what the consumer likes. So I know how many consumers in a given month are trying DeFi products, or they're playing games, or they're trying NFTs. And I also have built over the years a capability of bringing great products to market. And so in 2023, we began to experiment with what it would look like if we started to have our own private label products in our platform. What would it look like if we had a trade experience natively in Layer 3? What would it look like if we had a game experience native in Layer 3? And we ended up doing that and to much success. We've done a few $100 million in volume through our trade product. Our games product is one of the most used games products in the industry. And so that evolution, I think is very interesting, particularly if you have any founders or any aspiring entrepreneurs in your audience, because some of it is just constant iteration. I think a fallacy that many people have is as a founder, you have a 10-year vision and you just kind of march towards that 10-year vision, when in reality, it's just many iterations. It's many iterations with a team that can move very quickly. We're releasing Layer 3 version 3, which is the largest and most expansive product release that we've ever had. We are, as we grow as a company, trying to do more of an Airbnb or Apple style product release where you have 2 big releases each year, one in Q2, one in Q4. And this release changes the way the consumer experiences crypto. The interface itself feels far more alive. You have different parts of the product for trade or for games or for discovery. There are social elements to it. So you can explore things with your friends. You can compete against your friends. You can compete against other members of the community. And so we're trying to bring a product to market that very much changes the way consumers interact with the industry. And again, I'm intentionally being a bit ambiguous, but it is, I think, going to be a pretty large release. So if any of your audience are interested, go to layer3.xyz and create your account and set your notifications on. Look, the Korean market from a consumer perspective is a great market in crypto. However, I saw an interesting stat that most of that activity is trading, right? It's trading on perhaps BitDom or Upbit or some of the larger exchanges. And I think our product does an excellent job of getting users to start trying things on chain. Again, I understand that trading is a specific type of experience for a consumer, and they might not want to do things perhaps in crypto that are not trading. but I would encourage the consumer market to give it a shot, layer3.xyz. It really is a great place to begin your journey and to start trying some of these different products. And, the worst thing that might happen is you find a new way to trade on chain through Layer 3.